This is a download from BFM 89.9, the business station.
Alliance Bank presents you The Breakfast Grille. Top interviews you can't afford to miss on BFM 89.9, the business station.
Good morning, this is The Breakfast Grille. If you have just joined us, I am Ibrahim Sani. This morning we are with the former Finance Minister of Thailand, Mr. Korn, Chatikavanij. He's currently the chairman of Thailand's Democratic Party Policy Unit. Good morning, Mr. Korn.
Good morning. Good morning to everybody.
Could you tell us a little bit about your role presently?
We're in a political lull as a result of the recent coup. I've been given a lot more time to go into great depth in analyzing the country's problems, challenges, and opportunities, and in coming up with workable strategy and specific policies to drive Thailand forward once we return to democracy. And so I've been able to spend the past year looking into our problems related to our educational system, our problems related to healthcare, as well as issues that we believe will help drive Thailand's economy into the next several decades.
Considering that right now, as you rightly pointed out, it is in a political lull, how efficient are you in executing your policies?
To be honest, we're not in execution mode. That's very much the role of the military government. We are in preparation mode, really, because frankly, there's a lot that will undone when the military government passes the baton back to civilian rule, not least because there are a number of changes and reforms that are necessary that a military government will find hard to achieve. So we've got to be ready. And we are, however, having said that, been able to execute some of our thoughts and policies in smaller scale, really as local experiments, seeing how they pan out so that we can think about what improvements are needed in order to allow us to scale these ideas and policies towards a national scale. These are basically luxuries that political parties don't usually have, i.e. we don't usually have this kind of time. And doing our best to make sure that we use the time that was given us because of current circumstances as efficiently and productively as possible.
On the topic of the military government approving a $23 billion plan to upgrade the national railway system, you were mentioning that it is not the military's government job to make economic decisions. Could you explain why you mentioned these statements?
While they're in power, they obviously do need to make hopefully sound economic decisions. But what I was alluding to was the primary goal of this particular military government. They took power at the time when there was clearly an impasse between political factions. There was an increasingly violent series of demonstrations on the streets that was looking very likely to escalate further. So their main role in taking over control of the country was really to bring peace and order back to the streets and back to Thailand as a whole. I consider that to be a primary goal. Everything else really is secondary. And frankly speaking, not necessarily their expertise.
What is the outlook of the return of democratic government in Thailand? Will we see that anytime soon?
Well, I think that's a very topical question. We all in Thailand are asking when exactly there will be an election. The military had previously promised that an election would take place early next year. Well, that looks close to being impossible. And now there's debate as to whether it will happen within the next calendar year at all. Partly depends on how the constitutional debate takes place in about a month's time. And if the constitution as drafted by the body that was set up by the military is rejected, then that would postpone any poll for at least another six months to a year. So I guess we're looking at a timescale of between 1 and 2 years as to when there will be an election and the return of a democratic government.
Do you think by having political personalities, for instance, ex-Prime Minister Abhisit or the Shinawatra family, do you think this would help rejuvenate the interest of getting democracy back faster?
Well, I think it has to be admitted that as much as we'd like politics to be all about policies, the truth in any democracy anywhere in the world is that personalities count. And attractive personalities make democracies more appealing. So I would hope that there are interesting personalities that continue to be involved in Thai politics. Hopefully there's a whole load of new faces that are also appealing to the voting public that would appear on the political scene. We do need that in order to keep people involved and interested.
Let's rewind the clock for a bit. During your time as the former finance minister, you initiated a 117 billion baht, that comes to about 3 to 3.5 billion US dollar stimulus package in 2009. A second package that is valued over 1.4 trillion baht was also announced. And most of these funds were invested in improving infrastructure in Thailand. Do you think this is still a wise decision, retrospectively looking back?
Definitely. We had Malaysia face similar issues. Many other countries around the world face the same issues in the aftermath of the 2008-2009 financial crisis emanating out of the West. And we all needed to act both as individual countries and also in concert in fiscal pump priming in order to make up for lack of demand from our traditional export markets and lack of purchasing power in each of our domestic economies. So the role of the government was highlighted and had to come out with the most appropriate stimulus packages according to each of the needs of our different economies. And for Thailand, that involved both cash or near cash handouts to the needy as well as investments in infrastructure projects. And we had to, in particular, focus on so-called ready to shovel, sort of smaller projects because can more easily be executed and disbursement can take place within a short space of time. All of this combined was very successful. Thailand was one of the fastest recovering economy in the year 2009-2010 when now economies rebounded with growth of 7-8% plus.
With a lot of heavy investment and capital outflow with this regard, do you think quantitative easing may have to be put in place to basically supplement some monetary policies that were done during your time?
I think the trend has been signaled quite clearly that there will be easing. So the issue really is how that impacts upon regional liquidity. And different countries will face this issue with different degrees of difficulty. There will almost be no direct impact on Thailand because we've been dependent on domestic savings almost entirely with regards to, for example, government debt and most of also corporate debt. So a tightening of global liquidity doesn't have direct impact, but indirectly, obviously, nobody can escape. Unfortunately, the economic cycles of different countries are also different. We may be seeing U.S. recovery, but in many other countries, that is not yet happening. So an early tightening of the U.S. economy will definitely pose some challenges to other economies.
With Thailand right now at a speculative grade with regards to sovereign bond rating, do you think it's difficult for Thailand to be included in the investment grade rating, considering the turmoil right now that is happening on the political front?
Yeah, obviously it doesn't help. Luckily, it doesn't impact us as much as it might be doing if we were trying to access the international capital markets in a big way. That's not to say that we won't have to in the future. We are talking about huge infrastructure needs for Thailand over the next several years. You mentioned earlier the big railway network upgrade. That's part of the story. There's substantial amounts of money that will have to be invested to upgrade and modernize the infrastructure over the next decade. And I think it would be increasingly difficult for us to finance that entirely out of domestic savings the way we have been doing since the last financial crisis. So given that, we do need to work towards improving how our risk is perceived. And that needs a greater clarity on our political development. But I trust things will move forward in a positive way. There may be a little delay here or there, but I think the direction cannot be questioned.
We are with Mr. Korn Chatikavanij, the former finance minister of Thailand. When we come back, we'll talk about the tax structure of Thailand and perhaps how to improve on social inequality within that nation. You are with me, Ibrahim Sani, on the Breakfast Grille, BFM 89.9. Welcome back. This is the Breakfast Grill, and you're with me, Ibrahim Sani. This morning, we are with Mr. Korn Chatikavanij. He is the chairman of Thailand's Democratic Party Policy Unit and the former finance minister of Thailand. Mr. Korn, during your time as the finance minister, there were a bunch of things that you wanted to introduce, and one of them is taxing prostitution, so-called the sin tax. This did not materialize. Any reason why?
I don't think I ever was that specific that I wanted to tax prostitution. But sin tax in general has always been a significant source of revenue for successive Thai governments. We have, of course, during our time and also by subsequent governments, increased tax on alcohol, increased tax on tobacco. So that hasn't changed. There are talks about us formalizing and I dare say legalizing underground activities such as illegal gambling and so on and so forth in order to be able to control them better and from a Ministry of Finance perspective in order for us to be able to tax these activities. But that hasn't come about. I think there are a lot of social sensitivities towards formally acknowledging the existence of some of these gray or blackish activities. So I would say, all in all, it's work in progress.
Now, do you think this is a taboo issue with regards to taxing the so-called grey activities? Because it goes without saying that governments can earn a lot from taxing grey areas. Singapore does it well. We've seen it done in the Netherlands. Do you think Thailand can overcome the taboo issue?
I'll be honest with you. I think in a conservative country such as Thailand, it will be a tough ask in the foreseeable future. For example, for us to formalize or legalize issues such as gambling. By the way, the issue of, for example, legalizing casinos was brought up during this military government. And there was such an outcry by the public at large and by conservative groups in particular that even the military government had to very, very quickly backtrack on early indication that they were supportive of this move. In a way, it can be argued it's a shame, but I think in all societies there's a right time and a right place to do things. I think something like legalizing casinos can be correct and appropriate for some societies, but some societies may need a bit more time to come to terms with that policy option. So I think we'll inch towards it, but I don't expect significant change, as I said, within the foreseeable future.
Let's move into social inequality. We've seen a lot of countries like Cambodia, for instance, have rejuvenated their social inequality status by introducing microfinancing industry. Right. Do you think Thailand can perhaps look into this seriously as a pioneer?
Yes, indeed we are. I think you touch upon a very important subject. It is not just about moral issues. It's really economic. I mean, when you have huge inequalities of income and particularly huge inequalities of opportunities, you're talking about inefficient allocation of resources and the fact that substantial resources, in this case people, are not realizing their full economic potential because of lack of access to opportunities and particularly to financial resource. Any respectable government need to address this aggressively. And we're seeing significant progress of this, both through the commercial banking space, both through the capital markets, and also through the so-called SFIs, the specialized financial institutions that are owned by the state.
If you have just tuned in, we are with Mr. Korn Chatikavanij, the chairman of Thailand's Democratic Party Policy Unit. Mr. Korn, What do you think Thailand has to play with regards to invigorating ASEAN as an economic bloc?
Well, first of all, I'm a huge fan of the concept of ASEAN, and I really experienced that firsthand when I had the opportunity to be minister. We achieved so much together as ASEAN during that period that was so obvious to all concerned that as individual countries we could never have managed. I mean, just for example, we at the time when of a lot of tension because of the global economic crisis of 2009, we were able to get a seat at the very important G20 meeting that was held in London in early 2010, simply because we packed together as ASEAN. Now, individually, Malaysia or Thailand, all the other ASEAN nations, save for Indonesia, would never have had that opportunity. So that's at the geopolitical level. We can see how significant ASEAN can be. Now, all of us have a lot to contribute, and I would say Thailand has been less engaged than in the past 3 or 4 years than it can or it should be, and it really needs to re-engage both at the political level as well as at the economic level in order to help ensure that the much vaunted economic integration is truly meaningful.
Can we talk a little bit about border security? There's a lot of Rohingya migrants that are going through Thailand and into Malaysia. Do you think this is a big concern for these two countries, Thailand and Malaysia, to look at?
Well, of course it is. I think it has been a huge issue for our countries, and I think it's a test of how ASEAN addresses what is essentially an internal ASEAN issue. How we blend in sovereignty with issues related to human rights and correct morals, and how we work together in order to find resolution to this problem. I think it became clear to all countries affected that just sort of turning a blind eye and saying that this is not our problem doesn't work. It just these problems don't just disappear without coordinated action.
Considering that the election is still far away, maybe 1 or 2 years down the road, what do you think would be the core economic policy should your party, the Democrat Party, is voted into office? What can we expect?
Well, first of all, education. I think the major issue for facing the Thailand economy is lack of competitiveness, and almost all of our problems, social or economic, I think is derived from one single issue, and that is the declining quality of our education. So we need to address that most of all. But beyond that, there are what is necessary, something we touched upon earlier in this conversation, which is the need to move very quickly towards investing in necessary infrastructure, particularly transport infrastructure, and as a priority. Beyond that, I think we need to also look at our agricultural sector. It's going through a very challenging time. And when I talk about agriculture, I mean both in terms of how we manage increasingly scarce resource such as land and water, as well as how we help farmers in accessing markets and opportunities in order to increase their bargaining power. So these would be, the 2 or 3 main issues that we think we should be focusing on.
That was Mr. Korn Chatikavanij, the former Finance Minister of Thailand and currently Chairman of the Thailand's Democratic Party Policy Unit. The speaker, Mr. Korn Chatikavanij, will be speaking at the World Capital Markets Symposium organized by the Securities Commission, taking place on the 3rd to 4th of September 2015. I am Ibrahim Sani on the Breakfast Grille for BFM 89.9.
The BFM Breakfast Grill was brought to you by Alliance Bank. Banking made personal. A total banking relationship that rewards you.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To find more great interviews, go to bfm.my or find us on iTunes. BFM 89.9, the business station.